even back in the day when this game came out, I remember that kind of talk of people saying, you know, the music is not as good. Hey music friends, this is Davi Vasc, I'm a music composer for games, and today we have a request from Patreon, so we're gonna listen to and talk about the track called the Dalmasca Estersand from Final Fantasy XII. And I'm embarrassed to say that I've never played Final Fantasy XII, but I actually love the composer for Final Fantasy XII. Hitoshi Sakimoto is actually one of my favorites. I love his work on Final Fantasy Tactics and on the Tactics Ogre games. So yeah, I'm curious to know how similar this track will be to those games. So yeah, let's go. Oh man, this already sounds... This already sounds so much like Final Fantasy Tactics. Oh man. Okay, so like I said, sounds very much already like Final Fantasy Tactics music, and it's so nostalgic to hear this, even though I've never heard this before, because it sounds so much like that era of video game music, you know, that it sounds like PS2 music. It sounds like that era of, you know, GameCube, PS2 and Xbox music. It's very, very characteristic of the era, especially the orchestral samples that they're using. It sounds like I said, PS2 music. And even in the beginning here, when I started listening to this, I thought to myself, this sounds kind of familiar. And I don't think that the two tracks are related at all, but it reminded me of the overworld theme for Zelda Twilight Princess. And again, I don't think the two tracks are related at all. I don't think there's any sort of reference going on here. I think it's just coincidence. But it's fun to think about that the two games are from this kind of the same time period, so it ties into what I said before about the kind of characteristic sound of that era, that early 2000s era of video game music. And then it goes into this. And this is another thing that is very much a Hitoshi Sakimoto thing. The song keeps changing. The arrangements are so complex and the music is so free-flowing, it keeps changing all the time. It never lingers too much on one thing. So heroic. Oh. Yeah, so this is the chords that he used here is something that he likes to do a lot, at least in the, I remember in the Final Fantasy Tactics soundtrack, he used to do this sequence of chords a lot here. So it's a sequence of 3 happy chords in a row. So sounds super heroic, super positive and glorious. And this last happy chord here, the last happy chord of the sequence, is actually what we call a borrowed chord. It means that this chord was actually not, it actually doesn't belong here. It's not the correct chord to put here. The chord that was supposed to go here was a sad chord. But you replace it with a happy chord, and it makes the whole sequence much more imposing, much more glorious. And this is not necessarily a Hitoshi Sakimoto thing. It's a fairly common kind of trick to do, but it sounds like Sakimoto. It sounds like Final Fantasy Tactics, and I bet he does that a lot in 12 as well. something I forgot to mention earlier. The song is in triple meter, so... oh. It has that kind of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 kind of swing to it. Oh. The music is so fast-paced. It keeps changing all the time. But yeah, I was gonna say that it's in triple meter, so it has that kind of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 kind of swing to it, and it feels very much like an adventuring kind of song. By the name of the track, it's Dalmasca Estersand. Sounds like a location name, so I assume it's probably like an exploration kind of track. You're in this area and the track is playing, pretty standard stuff. So it sounds like, you know, go out adventuring, go, explore, go to your destination. Definitely sounds like an adventuring kind of song. This sounds beautiful, so exciting. And again he's doing the thing with the borrowed chord. Remember, it's not the exact same sequence, but he's again replacing chords that were supposed to be sad chords with happy chords. So it just becomes a big sequence of only happy chords, and it sounds so sublime and exciting and glorious. And this is a good example of you know, happy chords do not mean that the music becomes kind of silly and childish. You can have music with a lot of happy chords that sounds epic and adventurous. I'm gonna show what he's doing here. So it's just a sequence of happy chords, and this part specifically, I almost want to say, I mean, the name of the track again, Estersand, I feel like is maybe an exploration track, you know, a place that you walk in because, you know, Estersand. But I almost want to say it sounds, this part specifically sounds like flying music because it sounds so heavenly. I know there are flying ships in this game like a lot of Final Fantasy games have, so who knows. Oh, it's gone a little quiet. Building up. Oh. Beautiful melody. Like, take this melody here for as an example. Such a beautiful melody. But the thing about Final Fantasy XII music and Final Fantasy Tactics music and Sakimoto, you know, Hitoshi Sakimoto, his style is not catchy at all, isn't it? It's not a catchy melody that you can sing. And I remember even back in the day when this game came out, I remember that kind of talk of people saying, you know, the music is not as good. And Hitoshi Sakimoto came in to replace one of the most legendary composers of all time, which was Nobuo Uematsu, which was the composer for all Final Fantasy games, I think, prior to this. And Nobuo Uematsu's style was a lot more catchy than this. There were a lot more recognizable and singable melodies in his stuff. So I understand the shock that people felt when Hitoshi Sakimoto came into the franchise. But now I'm also very happy that, especially nowadays, it seems that people appreciate this kind of style a little bit more. Nowadays, you know, Final Fantasy Tactics is one of the most legendary soundtracks of all time, and Final Fantasy 12 as well is very highly regarded, which is good. It's very good because Hitoshi Sakimoto has a very, very unique style. It's definitely not the usual kind of catchy melodic stuff, but it's deeply, deeply complex and very, very deeply emotional as well. This track was suggested on Patreon by Lunar. Hooray, Lunar! And hey, sometimes people have track suggestions for me that are not usually the stuff that I cover here on the channel. So if you have a track like that for me, do like Lunar did and go on Patreon, share a track from a video game that you love with me so that I can share it with the world, because, you know, sharing the music from the video games that we love is what we do here in this channel. So remember, whenever you're ready to spread your wings and go on a music journey again, I'll see you there.